I very recently said, there are more and more Hall effect or HE keyboards coming to the market these days. And here we are again with another new HE keyboard. This time it's NuPhy getting into the HE game, and not just getting into it, but potentially becoming a leader in the Hall effect performance with the Field75 HE. Let's take a closer look and see how successful NuPhy was at bringing top-tier gaming performance to their unique keyboard. Before we dive in, I want to mention that NuPhy sent me the Field75 HE for the purpose of reviewing it. I was not paid to make this video, and NuPhy has no input on my review. I do have an affiliate link in the description for you if you're interested in picking up the Field75 HE and you'd like to support this channel. As I said in the intro, more and more companies are making Hall effect keyboards now, and it's all about performance and customization. Hall effect keyboards can use super high polling rates and can allow you to customize where the switches register your input, or the actuation point. And there's even more cool things you can do to customize the Field75 HE. So let's dive into the features and specs, then we'll talk pros and cons, and we'll also walk through that more detailed customization. The NuPhy Field75 HE is a 75% keyboard with 83 keys, 8 additional buttons, a volume roller, and an ANSI layout. There is not currently an ISO layout available. The construction is ABS plastic, and there is currently only one color option. The dimensions are 372.3 by 142.8 millimeters with a front height of 21 millimeters and a rear height of 31 millimeters, not counting the keycaps. The weight is 1,205 grams, or just about 2.66 pounds. There are fold-out feet and a total of 2 typing angles. Connectivity is USB-C wired only with a polling rate of up to 8,000 Hz or 8 kHz. The polling rate can be adjusted from 1,000 Hz to 8,000 Hz in the customization software. Internals include a hot swappable PCB, which of course is only compatible with HE switches, an aluminum plate, a top mount design with silicone washers, and several layers of foam. The stabilizers are plate mounted and pre-lubricated. The PCB does not have support for PCB mounted stabilizers. Switch options include Gateron KS20 white Hall effect switches with up to 4 mm of travel, or Gateron Jade HE switches with up to 3.3 mm of total travel. The keycaps are double shot PBT in a cherry profile, and they are not shine through, but NuPhy does offer shine through keycaps for purchase separately. Backlighting is full south-facing RGB, and the modes can be controlled with the lighting dial as well as in the software. There are pre-programmed Mac and Windows modes, as well as a third custom mode with a physical switch to change between the modes. All customization is done with NuPhy IO, which is a web-based application that works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Customization includes remapping for all 3 modes and multiple layers, control for the backlighting, as well as all the Hall effect features, including switch actuation and reset points, and additional custom functions that control how each key behaves when pressed. A little bit more on that later. The Field75 HE is available from NuPhy for $149.95 US with Gateron white magnetic switches, or $174.95 US with Gateron Jade switches. All right, let's start talking about pros and cons for the Field75 HE, and we'll also dive into the customization. So the first pro for us to talk about is that Hall effect performance and your customization options. You get both the high performance benefits as well as the extra customization that Hall effect enables. As far as the performance goes, you get 8K polling, or 8,000 Hertz polling, and NuPhy made sure to include a high-performance MCU that won't bottleneck the polling rate, ultimately delivering a super low latency of 0.5 milliseconds. Now for reference, here are a few latency test results conducted by ratings.com just to illustrate how low 0.5 milliseconds really is. Notably, the regular mechanical Field75 has a wired connection total latency of 2.8 milliseconds, which is already very good, but the HE model takes a whopping 2.3 milliseconds off of that figure. So as far as latency performance goes, we have a top tier result here. Now, ratings.com hasn't actually tested the Field75 HE. The 0.5 milliseconds is the claim from NuPhy, and the result that they get with their actual test usually is a little bit higher latency than what manufacturers claim. So we do have to keep that in mind, and I personally don't have the equipment and setup that's necessary to accurately measure latency like ratings.com does. So if the claim from NuPhy holds up, and even if it's within a little margin of error, it's going to be in the top as far as latency performance. All right, now let's talk about the other half of that pro, and that is the customization. I'm happy with the direction that NuPhy went here. In order to customize the Hall effect properties of your inputs, we need software that can perform very specific functions, and that usually means proprietary software. But instead of an app you have to download, NuPhy opted for a web-based tool they call NuPhy IO. Keychron recently did a similar thing with their Launcher web app. So the good news with this is that it works on Windows, Mac, and Linux, so no worrying about compatibility or being left out of the mix with the software. This was not the case with the original Field75 Mechanical, which used NuPhy's console software, and that was only available on Windows, and it also wasn't that great. So we have an improvement here as far as the interface for customization. Now, getting into the details of that customization, instead of just having simple layers here, there are 3 profiles you switch between with this dial on the left side of the keyboard. By default, they're set up as Mac, Windows, and gaming profiles. Now, the gaming profile is really just there so you can create a custom profile with all your preferred gaming settings and have that saved separately from the standard modes. But you can actually customize all 3 of these profiles if you don't need separate Windows and Mac modes. So you could have 2 custom profiles and a standard one. Now, when it comes to the actual customizing, the basic remapping experience is pretty straightforward, and it's a live edit, so you don't have to remember to save or send your changes to the keyboard when you're done. For the more advanced customizing of the switch inputs, this is where it could get a little confusing if you're not familiar with Hall effect keyboards. NuPhy didn't necessarily make this more confusing with their interface. There's just some terminology here that could be confusing if you're not sure what it's referring to. You can change the actuation point of just some or all of the switches. To change them all, you click on Select All on the right side of the screen, or to change individual ones, you just click on the individual keys that you want to change. There's a live display of the current actuation point on each key, and then you move this slider in the control area below to move the actuation point. There's also a selector on another tab to indicate which type of switches you currently are using. I'm not sure what would happen here if you use Hall effect switches other than the 2 that are available to order. I don't have another type to test out. I only have the 2 that it comes with. Then on the right side of the screen, you've also got options for the rapid trigger and reset point features. These different options control whether the reset point is the same as the actuation point or another point that you set. Now, another more advanced type of customization you can do is accessed by right-clicking on an individual key. There are special functions here, including the ability to have a single key press trigger multiple entries at different travel points. You can also have a key behave differently if you quick press or hold down the key. There's some pretty cool possibilities with these features, and it's not all just about gaming, because there are potential productivity or programming things that you might want to program those keys to do, taking advantage of those functions and saving you time. However, there is one thing you can't do with NuPhy IO, at least not yet, that we will talk about in the cons section. All right, wrapping up the conversation about customization, you can also customize the backlighting in NuPhy IO, so they didn't leave that feature out. Overall, I count NuPhy IO as a pro, and I would say it's definitely a huge improvement over the last proprietary customization tool, which was NuPhy Console. Moving on to other pros, we have nice keycaps here. They're a nice quality, more of a standard profile here than what we've seen NuPhy using lately. Like on the Halo V2 series, they use the MSA profile, which is a little more sculpted and rounded. Not everybody was a huge fan of those keycaps, so you have a little bit more of a crowd-pleasing profile here, and the quality is very nice. The double shot is a full layer of double shot. You've got nice crisp legends. The colorway is subjective whether you like it or not, but overall, I'm happy with the quality of these keycaps. I also like, although it increases the price, I like that NuPhy provides the option to get Gatoron Jade magnetic switches in the Field75 HE in addition to the white KS20 magnetic switches. The Jades, in my opinion, feel a little bit snappier, a little faster response than the KS20 switches, and they produce a nice sound, so I like that you can get them, although it does increase the price. Another pro would be the extra buttons for basic functions, so you can do some different things with, say, your function row if you wanted to, but there is a downside here as well. We'll talk about that in the cons, but it is nice, always nice to have some extra buttons that you can have do some different things that frees up some of your other keys that you might have remapped otherwise. And the extra dials and switches, it's always nice, I think, to have some physical controls that free up, again, some key commands to do other things. You've got your mode switch that we talked about earlier here on the left. You've also got a little dial that controls the brightness and the mode of the backlighting. Pressing it changes the mode, and turning it up and down, or left and right, I guess, changes the brightness level. So again, I think it's nice to have a physical control for that. All right, now let's move into the neutral section and talk about things that are either very subjective or kind of maybe have a pro and a con about them, or just things that not everybody will care about. So first up, let's talk design. Design, of course, very subjective, but let's be honest here, this is a very niche keyboard, not only because of the Hall effect switches that not everybody needs or cares about, but because of the design. There's nothing wrong with making a unique keyboard that isn't just a typical design. It just means it may not appeal to as many people. So whether you like this design and the placement of all the extra buttons and dials and keys, that's really up to personal taste. The only thing that I see as a little bit more objective here is this front row of special function buttons. If you rest your hands in just the right way while typing, these buttons might be in the way of your thumb. It's actually less of an issue for me than I thought it was going to be, and I never pressed them by accident, but I could see it not being, everybody's favorite position for buttons. I personally, would just kind of prefer they not be right here in front of the space bar. One other little note about the design, your volume is a roller, not a knob. So you might think that you don't have a mute function here because when you press it, it does nothing. You have to push it in. So if you push in from the side, there is your mute function. All right, now let's talk about typing feel. This is subjective, of course, and for me, it also falls in the neutral category because that's kind of how I feel about it. It's okay. I do like the jade switches, as I mentioned earlier, but the overall feel, it's very firm. They went with a top mount here, and they also stated that it's for a reason. Specifically, their concern with the Field75 HE was solely the accuracy of their switch actuation distances and being able to accurately measure that. So they didn't want any of your pressing force to be absorbed by the mount. They didn't want the PCB assembly moving. Now, I understand NuPhy's point here about the physics that are at play and wanting to be as accurate as possible with these switches and the actuation points, but basically my take on it is they went all in on the Hall effect features and the gaming performance, kind of at the expense of what I would prefer the typing feel to be. Now that may sound like a con, but I'm leaving it here in the neutral section because that is heavily influenced by my own preferences, and some people may actually like the firm feel. So going along with the feel, another neutral thing here would be the sound. Again, because it's very subjective, but it's not the best sounding NuPhy keyboard in my opinion. Just listen to the Halo 75 V2 compared to the Field75 HE. Again, because that's so subjective and subject to my own preferences, I'm leaving it in the neutral section. Now, one neutral thing that I'll mention here that is the same as something I said about the Sea-Doo C75 HE is the lack of wireless. To me, it's not a big deal because wireless HE keyboards are not exactly common yet. There is the Keychron Q1 HE, but it's limited to 1000 Hz polling even over the wired connection. If you want the highest performance and lowest latency, then not having wireless is likely a worthy trade-off, but some people may still prefer wireless. Now, one last thing I want to mention in this neutral category is the Field75 HE is more like the Halo line. It's a pre-built keyboard that is not really intended for you to be taking it apart and modifying. And NuPhy made it very clear on the site that all the decisions they made were really about maximizing the Hall effect performance. Now, that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but if you're looking for a keyboard that encourages mods and physical customization, the Field75 HE here kind of goes in the opposite direction. All right, now let's talk about a couple of cons for the Field75 HE. First, let's get back to the customization. NuPhy IO does not include macro creation, at least not yet. I don't know if they're planning on bringing that to NuPhy IO in the future, but for now, that seems to be a big missing feature in my opinion. Those extra function keys, they can't be macro keys. In my opinion, that's kind of a big purpose of having extra keys is being able to assign a macro to them, and you can't do that, at least not now. Speaking of these function buttons, you also cannot do any of these special functions like dynamic entries. You can only assign individual basic key entries to these buttons, so that further limits their usefulness. One thing that I am counting as a con that normally I would put in the neutral category is actually about the backlighting. It's south-facing. That means if you want to get shine-through keycaps, you're going to be limited in your selection because there are a lot of shine-through keycaps on the market that have legends towards the top of the keycap, and south-facing LEDs don't illuminate the top of keycaps very well. Now that still may not matter to everyone, but I'm counting it as a con here because this keyboard is supposed to be the most gaming-focused keyboard NuPhy offers, and I think north-facing RGBs would have been a better choice. Another small con here is that there's only currently one color option. You certainly can change the keycaps out if you don't like them, but there's currently only one case color option. The last con I'm going to mention here is about the construction. Now, I almost put this in the neutral category because it is subjective, but the design, as I said, is unique and subjective. However, for this price point, I think it's a little disappointing that it's all plastic. I would like something a little more premium feeling if the price is going to be $150 or higher, which the Field75 HE is. That does not mean it feels cheap, because it doesn't. It still feels rather solid here, but for me, it's a small downside that it doesn't feel a bit more premium at this price point, but if your only priority is performance, then you may not care. So now let's consider the features and performance as well as the price. The price with Gateron KS20 white switches is $149.95, and the price with the Jade switches is $174.95. For that price, you're getting excellent latency performance, not just good, but better than a lot of other gaming keyboards. You're also getting the very detailed customization of the Hall effect switches, but that's also available from other Hall effect keyboards. And you're getting a unique keyboard with some extra dials and buttons, which not everyone offers. Certainly no one else offers this exact design. If we consider that Sea-Doo C75 HE that I recently reviewed, that keyboard is an all-metal exploded 75% layout for $139. It also has 8K polling, however, they don't provide a latency figure, and I don't have the setup to accurately measure it, so I'm not sure if latency performance is approaching the sub 1 millisecond that we expect to get here. It's got the same customization, however, the app is only for Windows. My conclusion on the C75 was that it successfully combined HE performance with a quality mechanical keyboard look and feel, and I thought $139 was a fair price for it. Now, comparing that to the Field75 HE, which starts at $10 more for the same KS20 switches, we have very high performance and better compatibility of the customization app, plus some extra function buttons and dials. But you don't have macro creation, at least not currently, and you also don't have the metal build quality. So is the guarantee of top tier latency performance worth those trade-offs and a slightly higher price? I'm not going to answer that one. That one is up to you. What I can say is that if your only or top priority is gaming performance in a Hall effect keyboard, then the Field75 HE is worth a look. But if you're looking for a balance of everyday typing with gaming performance, this one may not fit the bill for you. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the Field75 HE. Let me know if you pick one up for yourself and how you're liking it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech+Gear channel, and while you're here, why don't you check out one of these videos? I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thanks everybody. See you next time.